case gets here. So let's get live and is it?
Mr. Vice Chairman, we are live.
Very good. We will go ahead and start this committee meeting, a revenue meeting. Today, we're going to hear House Bill 189, mine product taxes for natural gas consumed on site. Senator Wasserberger, I see you're here to represent for us. Why don't you go ahead and walk us through it and tell us about it?
And Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Jeff Wasserberger. I represent Senate District 23, which has numerous coal mines in it. And so essentially House Bill 189, mine product taxes for natural gas consumed on site. It's relates to mine product taxes, the imposition of severance taxes on natural gas that is consumed on site, and then makes conforming amendments and requires rulemaking and provides for the effective date. On page 2, natural gas is defined, which means all gases, both hydrocarbon and non-hydrocarbon, that occur naturally beneath the Earth's surface. At line 7, we insert letter A, and line 12 is letter B, natural gas that is consumed on site where the natural gas is produced for any purpose except for those specified in Wyoming statutes 3914-205, little j and m. At 16, we have 37, Roman numeral 37, a qualifying well means a well in which at 19, line 19, page 2, a well site is already connected to a pipeline. Pipeline capacity is unavailable on the existing pipeline, and the producer and the pipeline operator jointly have filed an application with the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, attesting to the lack of existing pipeline takeaway capacity. On page 4, we get into the meat of the bill at page 3, lines 4 is where we get into the meat of the bill. It says the producer's well is not connected to an existing pipeline, but the producer's lands and leases, wells or gas are contractually dedicated to a pipeline operator, and the producer and the pipeline operator to which the lands, leases, wells or gas are dedicated jointly have joined an application with the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, attesting that it is either technically or commercially unfeasible to connect a pipeline to the producer's well, or at line 14, letter C, a producer's well is not already connected to the existing pipeline, and the producer's lands, leases, wells, or gas are not contractually dedicated, but the producer unilaterally has filed an application with the Wyoming Oil and Gas Commission attesting to these facts. Moving on, we add in language on page 4, at lines 4 and 5, consumed on site or sold to a third party for on-site consumption. At line 9 through 12, the provisions of this paragraph shall not comply to calculating the fair market value of natural gas, meaning the definition of Wyoming statute 3914-201A, 15 and B. At the bottom of page 4, this exemption shall not apply to natural gas that is consumed prior to sale for any purpose not specified in this subsection or in subsection of this section. And then on page 5, lines 4 through 10, natural gas, which if not for on-site consumption or sale, would otherwise be vented or flared under the authority of the Wyoming Oil and Gas Commission. And then, Mr. Chairman, that is essentially the bill. And Mr. Chairman, I must confess, I'd forgotten I co-sponsored this bill. So I have to apologize to the committee.
Any
But,
questions for Senator Wasserberger?
Majority floor leader sent me.
Yeah, that'll teach you.
Yeah.
Any questions for Senator Wasserberger? Oh, let's let you have a seat. And I know these other folks back here want to talk to us. I know Mr. Noble wants to talk to us for sure. Mr. Noble, welcome to Revenue.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to testify. Members of the committee, I'm Dan Noble, Director of the Department of Revenue. I'm concerned only because I'm not sure that I understand the intent of the bill. Okay. In listening to the testimony that I've heard in a number of instances, I'm not sure whether this is an attempt to ensure that we tax this vented or flared gas that is otherwise used for another purpose, or whether we intend to exempt it because it would otherwise be useless if we vented or flared it. I think you could probably make the case either way, that when you look at the way this bill is drafted, because there are sections in there that say that if it's consumed, it shall not apply to the exemption. And I guess then you have another section in it, section P, which is on page 5, which seems to want to exempt it as long as it is stranded. In other words, it's from a qualifying well, doesn't have any way of taking that capacity away. And it's been authorized by the WOGC to be vented, WOGCC to be vented or flared. So in other words, you're looking for another use for gas that would normally be vented or flared, I think. And if that's the intent of the bill, is to say, this is vented or flared gas that is used for another purpose. There is no way to get it away from the well. And the OGCC has already authorized it for venting or flaring. Is this exempt or not? And I think that's probably the crux of this bill. And I need to understand if it was the intent of the sponsors to tax it, this bill is probably unnecessary because it would, I mean, we already have statutes that says if it's not vented or flared, used for any other purpose, it's taxable. If the purpose of the bill is to say that this is gas that is stranded, this is gas that would normally be worthless, valueless, because we're going to vent it or flare it, not selling it, but it's going to be offered to a third party because of the fact that it was worthless in the first place, would we tax it or not? I think the attempt here, in the way this amendment is crafted, is to exempt it. I'm not sure that we achieved that purpose, but I think that's the intent of the bill. I don't know whether that was the original intent of the bill, and I can't speak to that, but you've got a fairly large section in exemptions, and you would assume that section P is an attempt to exempt that gas. I think it can be written better, and I could certainly offer some suggestions on that, but it's my understanding, and Mr. Obermuller will probably point out that there's a section in here that probably should have been taken out anyway, and that would probably help the bill along as well. So if the intent is to actually exempt this because it's already exempt, in other words, it's vented or flared gas, and I think there are volumes that are allowed by WOGCC, and they're not very large. I think it's 60 MCF a day. I think it would make sense to kind of restructure the exemption language in P to make it very definitive that this gas is being consumed on site, and it is limited to the gas that is authorized under OGCC. We could certainly make that suggestion. And with that, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Questions, committee, bless you.
Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead, Senator Shuley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. My questions were very similar to what yours were. I was debating whether we were talking about the flared gas or vented gas. We have some areas in my neck of the woods where they do this, and I always wondered if that was taxed or if it wasn't taxed, or should it be taxed? So again, I probably just need some more clarification. Is that truly worthless, the stuff that's flared, or could it be taxed? Or should it be?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, it's already exempt under statute, under J. If it's vented or flared, it's exempt. And I believe J is actually written on page 4. Natural gas, which is vented or flared under the authority of the OGCC and re-injected or consumed prior to sale, the purpose of stimulating, treating is exempt from taxation. It is in essence what it's saying. The language after that kind of confuses this bill, I think. The language that was inserted after that, I believe, in Pete Obermuller's amendment suggestion was removed from that, and I think it was kept. and unintentionally. But when you look at P, and something to understand here, this is not a natural gas well we're talking about here. This is an oil well that has natural gas as a byproduct and is typically, if there's no way to take it away, they try to vent it or flare it to either as a safety issue or as a practical issue to try to deal with it. I think the concern I have with it is I'm not sure that we clearly state what the intent is here. Are we going to exempt this or are we going to tax it? And that's the concern I have with it.
Further questions, committee? And I have to admit, when I read through this bill yesterday and today, it's confusing, particularly that sentence at the bottom of line 4. The J is fine until we get to that sentence. The new stuff that says this exemption should not apply to natural gas. And then I got confused when I moved on to P because it seemed to be talking about the same thing, and it's very confusing.
Oh, and when it talks about this in this subsection, you're talking about vented or flared gas. Okay. And then in P, you don't even mention P, and that's probably an exception that should be mentioned in that sentence if you're going to use it. So I think that's my concern with it is that I think the two kind of play against each other.
I see I got a question on both ends of the table.
Okay.
I saw your hand first, Senator Pappas, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, my confusion, I guess, is in that addition on page 4 up in line 4 and 5. If this truly is just a byproduct and not, how is it being sold with, how, it says or sold to a third party for consumption. Are there third parties on that site that they could use it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, I think that's what's missing from this discussion. This was actually referred to as a crypto mining bill on the other side, because there were some people that are actually making use of this today. Okay. There are some people that utilize natural gas to run generators, create electricity for, I guess I'd call them small data centers for crypto mining purposes. That's why they called it crypto mining. It's actually a data center that's being run off of stranded gas, if you will. Okay, and then probably more than just stranded gas, but that part would be taxable. What this, I think, is attempting to do is to say, if you're going to take stranded gas and you're going to use it for that type of purpose, being consumed on site, that it would otherwise be worthless, it would still be exempt from taxation. Okay. Any other purpose, meaning that it's over and above what the OGCC authorizes, it's now subject to tax just like anything else would be. But the way that this was presented on the House side was that this was being utilized by some companies today in Wyoming. This stranded gas, if you will, was being utilized by those companies. And they, while there is taxation associated with it, the question is this a purpose as it relates to this gas? The 60 MCF a day is a very small volume that would be used to generate this electricity. Should that be included in it or not? And I think that's really the crux of this is it exempt or is it taxable? One of the limiting factors is in what is a qualifying well, and that's actually identified on pages 2 at the bottom, starting on line 16 and through the next page through line 19. It talks about the fact that if there's takeaway capacity for this well, meaning you have a pipeline that could take it away from the well, it doesn't qualify anyway. It has to be something that is really pretty much stranded gas, and that the OGCC has said it's capable of, they're allowing it to be vented or flared. I think that's what limits the entire exemption, if you will.
Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
You'd mentioned that there's the practice out there of using the stranded gas to generate electricity on site, I'm assuming, since it's stranded there.
Mhm.
How is the distribution then of that power getting to data centers?
Mr. Overmore,
I'm a little confused.
Feel free to introduce yourself and jump in here because this is pretty complicated and confusing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very much appreciate that. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I think I can back way up here and start at the very beginning about what the lay of the land is, what the purpose of the bill originally was, what it sort of morphed into, and how the language that you have in front of you got all bollocksed up. And if you need to, and if you're going to move it, you're going to have to fix it. And actually, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, it's a clerical error. The House did not actually put into the bill the amendment that your colleagues on House Revenue passed. So the full House passed a bill that their committee did not actually pass. It's an LSO clerical error.
Mhm.
So the bill you have in front of you is just flat out wrong based on what the committee passed. So we'll get to that, okay? But so it's it's up to you, whatever. The bottom line is we support the bill. And let me back it way up. First of all, what we're talking about here in current law regarding flaring is only on oil wells. We're not talking about gas wells. Gas wells are not allowed to flare under Wyoming's under Wyoming rules. Oil wells are allowed to flare their associated gas up to 60 MCF a day. Very small amount. If they need to flare more than that, which happens on occasion because there's not takeaway capacity, there's not pipelines there to take that product or storage, or there's not ability to do it, the operator has to go to the OGCC and request a waiver on that amount. And then they have to report back periodically. And if they exceed that waiver, then they have a show cause hearing and they're penalized for that. The bottom line is on all of this that I really want the committee to understand is when it comes to flaring in Wyoming, we do not have a flaring issue in Wyoming. Flaring is very, very small. And so you bring it back to this bill, we're talking about a tiny amount of gas being used for any purpose other than sending it into takeaway capacity. Okay, so that's the current lay of the land. Now, what precipitated this? And this gets to your question, Senator Pappas, about what are you talking about on a third party and all of this? So Wyoming and North Dakota are the only two states dealing with this. Your colleagues in North Dakota are running a bill right now, very similar, because they've had this crop up as well. And in fact, the definition language on a qualifying well is with some conforming Wyoming language is basically verbatim to what your colleagues in North Dakota are doing to try to get a handle of this before it becomes a bigger issue. So what happens, Mr. Chairman, is that what has been happening is some entrepreneurs in Wyoming, Wyoming-based companies, one out of Casper testified to your committee in the House, have realized that the process of crypto mining, which is essentially just computer processing at a very large scale, can be assisted by moving that processing from a data center like you're thinking of into like an actual like crate, like a moving crate, shipping crate, or those sorts of things, and you move it all the way out to the oil well, and you set up shop right by the oil well, and you capture the associated flare gas to run the generators, to run the processors, to do your hocus pocus to come up with a cryptocurrency that somehow has value these days. That's what's happening. So the authors of the bill, Mr. Chairman, said, well, look, you're using gas at that point. In contrast to your question, Senator Schuler, does it really have value? In the case of associated gas where there's no takeaway capacity, there's no way to sell it, then Wyoming statute says it does have no value. And because we're limited at 60 MCF a day, it's really very, very, very small pennies, really is what we're talking about. But if you are using it for a purpose like crypto mining, it's sort of similar then to sending it down the pipeline. You've created a use for it. And so their intention was to tax that use. Okay. So all of that is the explanation for where we are today. So what the House tried to do, and it got all mucked up somehow, and I don't know how precisely, but what they tried to do is to try to bifurcate it because it got a little bit complicated. There's sort of some competing values here that the House was trying to thread this needle on. The one value is we want to, if we're going to sever natural gas and sell it, we want to promote the sale of that gas. So we really want it to go into a pipeline and down the line for beneficial use in the traditional sense. So if somebody sets up shop at the wellhead and there's already a pipeline there and the operator has a choice, I can sell it to Senator Baldwin crypto miners, or I can sell it to Senator Pappas pipeline. We want them to be on an even playing field for purposes of taxation. But if Senator Pappas pipeline is not there, and the only other option is for the operator to flare, and Senator Baldwin crypto comes in because he's an entrepreneur and can help even further reduce our already very limited flaring, that's actually a good public policy outcome. And we don't want to tax that. Now, wrapping our heads around how to write that was challenging. And that's where it got sort of messed up. So I can ask questions about that, but I can jump right into the bill and where it kind of got messed up. And if you choose to move it on, the changes I think you need to make on it, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman. So here's the things that were in the amendment that the House committee passed and then didn't actually get removed. Or needs to be changed. And the first one starts on page 4, line 4. So you'll see in red in your engrossed version, it says there, starting on line 4, consumed on-site or sold to a third party for on-site consumption. What the amendment that they passed actually said should have, after third party, should have been a comma, the word processed, comma, transported, or consumed, subject to the definition in 39-14-201 A 15 XV capital B. That's referring back to page 2 of the bill, that added definition of natural gas consumed on site. Okay.
Can you say it one more time for us?
I sure can. So on page 4, line 4, after the word party, it should say comma, processed, comma, transported, or consumed, subject to the definition in 39-14-201, little a, little xv, capital B.
I believe that's the same section that's referred to right now at the end of that paragraph.
Right. And so then, Mr. Chairman, at the end of that paragraph, lines 9-12, that's in your engrossed version, your House committee removed that, all that language. All of that should be gone from this bill.
Okay.
Then to your questions about the very confusing part of the exemptions in J, this one actually is this is a really important part, and where you all were asking these questions, page 4, line 22 through page 5, line 2, your House committee removed all that language. J is current language and J stands alone. And your House committee really wanted to make sure that J was not messed with, that is what it is, because there are lots of other, my members included, who do a lot of really important work out in the field in terms of taking flared gas and converting it to electricity for closed loop systems within a well pad and all that. Nobody wanted to mess up what we currently have, so they wanted to clean J to have J be totally clean. So they removed that language, and somehow it didn't get removed when it got to the floor, which leaves P, and P is what it is. And I think Director Noble has some suggestions for making P less awkward, but that is the language. So it's only those three things. And so just to close the loop, Senator Pappas, on your question about third party or otherwise, there's two possibilities for doing this sort of crypto mining. You could be like the entrepreneur in Casper who has set this up. It's a separate company. And so you're selling to a third party who is the crypto miner. It is also theoretically possible that an operator could say, hey, I'm going to set up my own little crypto mining shop. And so you're not actually selling to a third party, you're doing it yourself. And in that case, and in fact, in both cases, Director Noble has testified it is correct. The Department of Revenue has the authority under current statute to both value and tax in both of those cases on third party or on non-third party, non-arm's length transactions in terms of how to value and tax. So that's why we were able to get rid of a lot of the language once we kind of all wrapped our arms around the fact that Director Noble already has a lot of the authority with respect to the taxation. But if all you do is leave it as it is, because we've determined that Director Noble already has the authority, well, then what he does not have the authority to do is exempt beneficial use at the wellhead, for purposes of, for the public policy and environmental purposes of using an interesting entrepreneurial effort that also helps reduce associated gas flaring, which is a public policy benefit to Wyoming. So there we go, Mr. Chairman. The most confusing but relatively straightforward bill you've ever seen.
It makes a lot more sense now
Mhm.
than it did 10 minutes ago. Go ahead, Senator
Mr.
Pappas.
Chairman. So all of these changes, I mean, if we rolled back everything you said, was that how the bill was originally presented to the House, or were there things still in this engrossed version? I don't have a copy of the original one, but are there things in here that the House committee did put in that are okay? I mean, I guess
Yeah.
what I'm getting at is if we just roll back all the House changes, would the original bill be okay?
So let me answer that question a couple different ways, and maybe one of them will hit your question. The original bill authored by Representative Hunt was quite a bit more simple, but we believed it also didn't actually do anything. So we were the ones that came in and offered this rather substantial amendment that really changed it. And we were the ones that added the qualifying well definition and all of that stuff. All of that was sort of we were trying to deal with those layers of equally protecting midstream and crypto, and putting them on the same taxation level, depending on who an operator decides to sell to. That was all important to us, so that we didn't say, well, if I'm an operator and I sell it to my midstream gathering, I'm going to get taxed at 6% of value. But if I sell it to this crypto miner, I'm not taxed at all. So to remove that sort of imbalance, tax them both. Now, there were some members who said, why would you want to tax at all? I mean, if you wanted to not tax either one, we're fine with that. But it's assuming that you want to tax both, right? So that was number one. And then it came to that other level of, well, what do we do about the beneficial use that actually helps a different problem that was not associated with the original intent? So it did change pretty dramatically in the House. And what I can do, Senator Pappas, is just walk through the bill real quick and tell you what.
No, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm actually comfortable just making the changes that you suggest. I guess my thoughts are, frankly, if there's no carryaway capacity, if there's no pipelines there to be able to sell it, we ought to allow, whether it's being used by a third party or being used by the folks who own the facility there and running the facility, there's really no reason for us to do any taxation unless we're sending it in a pipeline somewhere. Does that make sense? Makes sense to me.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Ogre.
Senator Pappas, I will point out, though, that even in that case, under the exemption that we have listed in P here, if a crypto miner purchases gas from an operator at the well site, they are, as Director Noble, I think will attest, they are subject to sales and use tax. So there is actually a revenue stream in that case. It's just sales and use, not severance in that case.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, Senator James, did you have a question? Changed his mind. Okay, any further questions for these two gentlemen? I appreciate that. That was very helpful. We'll get back with you in a minute. Actually, let's do it now. Let's,
Mr.
you had
Chairman,
some suggestions.
I do have one
Oh,
more.
go ahead, Senator Pappas.
Question. There's some mention that there was some better language for P,
Yeah,
and I would like to hear that if I could.
go ahead,
Certainly.
Director Noble.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, the concern that our attorneys had with P is it doesn't directly state, okay, that this gas that is going to be consumed on site is going to be exempt from taxation. And I think there's a way to actually make it direct, and so that you are stating what is being exempted here, as opposed to if not for on-site consumption. You know, I think if what you're really trying to get at is that this stranded gas is going to be exempt from taxation, even though it's being sold or used by a third party, we're going to consider it exempt from taxation. There's a way to do that. And what I proposed was, and this is under P, it says on page 5, line 4, it says natural gas, and it says which. And then there's a comma, just say, I would say natural gas, which is consumed on site that otherwise would be vented or flared under the authority of the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, has no value and is exempt from taxation. And I would say, as long as the natural gas is certified by the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission as to have originated from a qualifying well. I think that directly states that this is gas that is consumed on site. Okay, we're directly stating that it's consumed on site, and it's exempt as long as it meets the criteria of the WOGCC. And I think that's really what was intended originally in this exemption, and it directly states it, as opposed to you're saying if not for on-site consumption or sale. You know, it would be exempt otherwise. Then the question is, are you really trying to exempt it here or not? This directly states this is gas that is being sold or consumed on a well that is qualified and is considered vented or flared gas by the WOGCC. And I think that directly states that this would be exempt. And I think you kind of want to be very specific about what you're exempting in one of these, in an exemption that you create.
Let's make sure we got that
So, Mr.
language.
Chairman, could I read that sentence back and
Go ahead.
Certainly.
see if
Make sure our secretary got that
you're
too.
saying natural gas, which is consumed on site,
Mhm.
that otherwise would be vented or flared under the authority of the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, has no value and is exempt from taxation as long as the natural gas is certified by the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission as to have originated from the qualifying well.
Exactly.
Okay. Senator Pappas. Yeah, if you can coordinate that, and so we'll get it written. If we so move and so approve. Okay, any further questions from Mr. Noble or Mr. Obermuller? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. That was
Mr. Chairman.
very helpful. I think I know why Senator Driscoll sent you, Senator Wasserberger. Are there any further comments from those here in the room? Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marguerite Herman. And just, I had a question. I think I understood the whole process, and I've been sort of interested in this in terms of gas flared or vented from school trust lands. And they have a whole separate rules process that I know does not intersect with this at all. But does this apply to gas that's used on site and is in exchange for some kind of compensation? So is there a monetary value somehow assigned to the gas that otherwise is permitted to be wasted? Just a question. And
A question which I believe one of those two gentlemen who just ran away can probably answer.
And I guess, Mr. Chairman, I would just say that if there is a value being in exchange, whether it's monetary or not, that would mean that it is in fact, well, I would just wonder aloud if that is as worthless as the OGCC thought when they gave the exemption. Just wondering that out loud.
You wondered out loud. Director Noble picked up his book. He looks like he's going to come up and answer that question for us.
Mr. Chairman, I think probably the way to really understand this is to look at what would happen to this gas were it not for this beneficial use. It would be vented or flared, which has its own environmental issues anyway, and which is why it's allowed in very limited quantities. So we're talking about, number one, gas that is associated with an oil well. We're not talking about something that is really marketable in most circumstances. And if it is marketable, in other words, if there is pipeline capacity available, it doesn't even meet the definition of a qualifying well at that point. So if it can be sold for a pipeline capacity and sold as pipeline capacity, it doesn't qualify for this in the first place. We're talking about gas associated with the production of oil that in very limited quantities is considered worthless by the WOGCC and is allowed to be vented and already has an exemption in the books as it relates to that. All we're saying is if there is another beneficial purpose for that particular gas, okay, that it will not be subject to the severance tax associated specifically with that gas. It does not qualify outside of any of those very narrow parameters that are put in place with this bill. So that's, may there be value associated with it? Certainly. Okay. But the thing is if we just vent it or flare it, we get nothing for it anyway. So really all we're doing is saying this is a beneficial purpose for this particular gas that actually has some benefit to everybody. I mean, and when you consider the fact that there's probably some economic development value associated with this type of use, granted, you're not going to get a lot of gas from this in the first place. Okay, the rest of it, if they're selling them commercial quantities of this gas in order to make this happen, it's going to be taxed anyway.
That makes sense. I have to comment. This is very creative use by the crypto folks. I'm very impressed.
Mr. Chairman, I would also wonder out loud that I assume the gas is not being given without consideration. There is some consideration. I don't know. I do not know. This is new to me. And I assume that it's not just offered without some kind of consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I can answer that question. This was as new to me when I walked in on the House side to the Revenue Committee. I had no idea what crypto mining even was. And the discussion that was held didn't really explain to me, in one shape, way, shape, or form, how this is being transacted at this point. Mr. Obermuller might be able to shed some light on that, but as far as I understand, I have no idea whether it's being sold for value. I would hope that there's something being captured for it, for sure.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, I would just further add, I mean, I'm not here to oppose the bill. I'm just trying to look and listen to the details. But that when the statutes and the rules, OGCC rules were written, they had no concept of crypto mining, that there would be such an on-site use. The on-site use was always for the production itself, to run the pumps and the condensers and stuff. This probably was not anticipated at all. And again, I'm not being critical of the bill, but it's just things to learn about.
And I could be wrong, but I suspect that this is an evolving field. We'll probably see further changes and new things that none of us can even imagine right now. So, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, until 3 weeks ago, I didn't even know it existed. So.
So, okay, thank you.
Very good. Further testimony in the room. No, everybody's on the back row except for poor Mr. Overmiller, who's now joined by Director Noble. I see that we have one online. Is that correct? To Mr. Mark Watson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Would you like me to admit him?
Yes, let's go ahead and bring him in. Good afternoon, Mr. Watson. Welcome to Revenue.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself and let us know what's on your mind.
So I'm Mark Watson. I'm the Director of the Oil and Gas Commission, and I've certainly enjoyed listening to all this. I'm really not here to testify, mostly just to answer questions, but you obviously had a lot of questions, and I think Mr. Noble and Mr. Obermuller probably answered all your questions. And so if you had questions of me, great. If not, I'm good.
Any questions for Mr. Watson committee? No, you got off very easy today, Mr. Watson, but thank you for coming to the meeting. We appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, if there's no further questions, no further comments, we'll close the public comment committee. What's your pleasure?
Chairman, I move the bill.
Senator Pappas moves the bill. And I suspect there might be an amendment or two here. Who would like to suggest those? And let's go ahead and Senator Pappas?
Well, Mr. Chairman, shall we put these all in a single amendment? Would that be preferable rather than?
That would probably be fine.
Okay, so as I understood it, our first change would be on page 4, line 5. We would insert after party,
Which actually starts on line 4.
line 4. Oh, yeah, correct. We would insert processed, transported, or
Comma between the two.
comma, transported or consumed subject to the definition of Wyoming statute 3914, I believe it was 201,
Mhm.
A, Romanet 15, B.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the first part, first change. And then on lines 9, we would strike,
Yep. Go ahead, Mr. Overmiller.
did I?
Snuck up here on me. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, I know it's breach of protocol. That language is exactly right, Senator Pappas, but you also have to delete the House language.
Oh,
Right on
yes,
the line 22 and
thank
23.
you, yes.
And
Yeah, we-
protocol is very lax here. We go with the flow. Thank you for coming up.
Yeah, we would delete everything that was inserted.
On line 22, starting with this exemption, all the way through the top of page 5 and through line 2.
What? No, we would, I think
Oh,
what
yeah.
Mr. Obermiller is talking about is just the
Oh, yeah.
additional language on line 4 and 5
Correct.
that was added. That's
Correct.
what's struck. Plus the addition of what I just read.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, that's the first change. And the second change would be then starting on line 9, we strike the word the, and then strike all of 10, 11, and 12.
Correct.
Okay. Then down on line 22, strike this exemption. Strike all of line 23. On page 5, strike lines 1 and 2.
Correct.
Okay. And then the next change would be in paragraph P. We would strike the words if not for on line 4 and insert is consumed. I guess you would strike. Would you strike the comma? I don't know. Somebody needs to figure out that grammar or the punctuation. Anyhow, we would insert is consumed. Also strike on that line consumption and on line 5 or sale and insert the word that. And on to line 7. Strike the word if and insert as long as the. Think got it all right. So let me just read it so everybody's got it. Natural gas which is consumed on site that would otherwise be vented or flared under the authority of the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission has no value and is exempt from taxation as long as the natural gas is certified by the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission as to have originated from a qualifying well.
Sounds good. That's what I had.
Okay.
That sounds good.
So those are all the changes that I know of.
Okay, moved by Senator Pappas. Are you ready for a question? Question on amendment, Standing Committee Amendment 1 by Senator Pappas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All if no, say no. There's nobody left. Okay, further comments or additions to the bill?
Question on the bill.
Question on the bill. Let's go ahead and take roll.
On House Bill 189 engrossed, Senator Baldwin,
Aye.
Senator James, Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Senator Schuler,
Aye.
and Chairman Case would be
Excused.
excused. So that would be 4 ayes.
Very
Do
good.
pass amended.
Very good. Senator Pappas, since you spoke so much here, would you like to present that on the floor? I knew he would. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate that a lot.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wasserberger.
Somebody had to do it. I've seen it happen where